Hello, survivors. Assuming anyone's still lucid enough to tune into this miserable broadcast. Welcome back to humanity's collective wake, brought to you live from everyone's favorite cozy hellhole, beneath what's left of civilization. Bunker 17, affectionately known as The Hole. I'm your eternally sleep-deprived host, Jack, the closest thing you've got left to a friendly voice in this wasteland. If you're new here, and by some morbid miracle you've survived long enough to stumble across my ramblings, allow me to offer my deepest condolences. I promise your night's about to get a whole lot worse. Tonight marks exactly 6 months since what I like to call the big oops, the glorious screw-up in a secret Soviet bunker where someone decided sleep was optional. Apparently, the fine folks back in 1947 thought sleep was holding back human potential. Ironically, turns out humans deprived of shut-eye tend to get a bit murdery. Who knew, right? But let's not dwell on the past, or at least not too much, because, frankly, folks, the past is pretty bleak. And the present? It makes the past look like Disneyland on ice. Allow me a quick history lesson, courtesy of your humble host. 6 months ago, somewhere beneath Siberia, some overzealous scientists unleashed a bacterial gas, an experimental sleep deprivation serum, loaded with genetically modified nasties. Initially intended for a handful of political prisoners, it instead took a world tour. Humans became raging insomniacs, sleepless zombies rampaging through the streets, ripping each other apart like Black Friday shoppers, fighting over a half-priced TV. But wait, there's more. Just when things couldn't possibly get worse, guess what, listeners? They absolutely did. Turns out, sleep deprivation plus critical nuclear power infrastructure equals massive meltdown. Who could have predicted exhausted workers forgetting to press a button or two? Other than literally everyone. Now the surface world glows with the friendly green haze of radiation, populated exclusively by grotesquely mutated horrors. Humanity, at least what's left of it, retreated underground to bunkers like this one. Tiny steel boxes with barely functioning filtration systems, hydroponic gardens that produce lettuce tasting suspiciously like sadness, and the constant comforting hum of recycled air. And me? Well, I hit the jackpot, trapped down here with no company but my ever-growing paranoia, a lifetime supply of powdered eggs, and a shortwave radio system built from spare parts, duct tape, and existential dread. I call her Betty. She's reliable enough, assuming you enjoy spontaneous outages and random broadcasts of mutants screaming, courtesy of our new friends up top. Speak of the devil. Don't worry. That's just our upstairs neighbors, reminding me they're still around and still terrifyingly alive. Or at least, whatever passes for life these days. Charming bunch. They especially love serenading me around 3 a.m., right when my caffeine pills start wearing off. Who said mutants don't appreciate good timing? All right, let's switch gears briefly and address a practical matter. Survival tip number 1 from your friend Jack. If your bunker's filtration system starts making noises that resemble dying cats, it probably isn't trying to serenade you. The bacteria, that lovely airborne stuff responsible for our insomnia and inevitable psychosis, can slip through even the tiniest crack. And believe me, you do not want to find out firsthand how quickly sleep deprivation erodes your sanity. Trust me on that one. You know, there's a certain twisted irony to all this. Before everything went sideways, my whole life revolved around uncovering conspiracies, mocking government incompetence, and laughing at society's idiocy. Now? Well, the punchline is apparently me, alone in a bunker, broadcasting to absolutely no one. Or maybe to you, assuming you're still holding on to sanity by your fingernails. Well, folks, sounds like that's my cue. Time to check the airlock and ensure our unwanted guests haven't invited themselves in for a midnight snack. Spoiler alert, I'm the snack. But if I survive another night, rest assured I'll be back tomorrow, bringing you more cynical observations, survival tips that probably won't work, and plenty of reasons to question why you even bother surviving. And remember, listeners, sleep tight. Oh wait, that's right. You can't. Well, good evening, listeners. Congratulations on surviving another 24 hours in this brave new world. Or at least, what passes for bravery these days. This is your friendly neighborhood bunker rat, Jack, broadcasting live from my lovely steel coffin, affectionately known as The Hole. If you've managed to tune in again, I either commend your courage or question your sanity, probably both. So, let's dive straight into tonight's exciting lineup. We'll be featuring a brand new segment called Jack's Survival Tips that definitely won't save you. But first, allow me a quick personal update. Turns out the screeching serenade from our mutant friends last night wasn't just background music. Nope, it was the intro to something far more unpleasant. When I checked the outer airlock earlier today, armed with nothing but a rusty crowbar, some expired pepper spray, and a disturbing lack of common sense, I discovered a surprise visitor. Spoiler alert, it wasn't the pizza guy. Instead, I found a lovely specimen of what we're now affectionately calling sleepwalkers. They're the latest evolutionary product of sleep deprivation meets radioactive bacteria. Think insomnia-fueled zombies, only uglier and substantially less charming. Imagine your worst Tinder date, but even less pleasant to look at. And let me tell you, folks, my uninvited guest was a real stunner. Half its jaw was missing, its skin a charming shade of radioactive avocado green, and its eyes, well, let's just say, they were expressive enough to haunt me for at least 3 lifetimes. Thankfully, my trusty crowbar and I managed to give it a warm welcome. On a totally unrelated note, remind me to disinfect literally everything later. But enough about my thrilling personal life. Let's return to you, my non-existent listeners. Time for tonight's featured segment, Jack's Survival Tips that definitely won't save you. Tonight's tip number 2. Don't open your airlock unless you're prepared for what awaits on the other side. Obvious, right? But humans have never been great at resisting curiosity, especially when cabin fever sets in. If you're desperate for a walk, here's a better idea. Pace around your cozy bunker, talk to your imaginary friends, or take up knitting sweaters out of recycled plastic bags. Anything beats shaking hands, or what's left of their hands, with a mutant insomniac. Speaking of airlocks and isolation-induced madness, let's dive into our mailbag, shall we? And by mailbag, I mean random shortwave radio transmissions I've intercepted from equally miserable bunkers around the world.
Please, anyone, respond. Filtration failing. Airlock compromised. We can't hold. They're coming through. My God, their eyes. Please help us.
And that uplifting message comes to us courtesy of an unknown bunker about 50 miles west of here. Thanks for brightening our evening, friend. If by some twisted miracle you're still alive and tuned in, my only advice is invest in better doors, or a faster running speed, or a combination of both. Ah, wonderful. Just when I thought the evening couldn't get any better, sounds like the lovely filtration system down here is trying to serenade me with another haunting melody. You hear that, listeners? That, my friends, is the delicate sound of impending doom, or possibly just rusty ventilation shafts, finally collapsing under the weight of existential despair. Either way, delightful ambiance. You know, sometimes I ask myself, Jack, why keep broadcasting? It's clearly pointless, right? Humanity's on permanent vacation. The mutants have the surface, and I'm stuck down here, narrating my slow descent into madness. But then I remember, I have an audience to entertain, even if that audience might just be the bacteria slowly invading my lungs. And before I wrap things up tonight, here's a cheerful bedtime story to help lull you all gently into another night of sleepless anxiety. Once upon a time, a well-meaning group of Soviet scientists decided that sleep was just a pesky inconvenience, holding back human progress. So they made a special gas to eliminate it, gave it a fancy, barely pronounceable scientific name, and injected it with genetically modified bacteria. But, as it turns out, humanity, without sleep, quickly devolves into something much worse, something grotesque, violent, and terrifyingly awake. And now, we're all paying the price. Sweet dreams, dear listeners. And by sweet dreams, of course, I mean endless nightmares, punctuated by occasional mutant screams. Because let's be honest, that's all that's left. Good evening, fellow survivors. Or should I say, fellow insomniacs. Welcome back to Insomnia Underground, the world's most depressing radio broadcast, voted unanimously by me, myself, and whatever shadows are lurking down here. It's your eternally awake host, Jack, coming to you live from humanity's subterranean paradise, The Hole. If you're somehow tuning in again, my congratulations on another day, not getting eaten, irradiated, or driven completely mad. Though if you're anything like me, you're probably already 2 out of 3. But hey, nobody's perfect. Now, about that lovely tapping noise you just heard. No, that's not Morse code or secret bunker signals from your friendly neighborhood host. That's the delightful sound of the ventilation system slowly deciding to betray me. Apparently, reliable infrastructure wasn't included in humanity's extinction preparedness kit. Go figure. But enough about the sounds of impending doom. Let's kick off tonight's broadcast with everyone's favorite segment, Jack's survival tips that definitely won't save you. Brought to you by existential dread and caffeine withdrawal. Tonight's tip number 3. Trust absolutely nothing that moves, breathes, or especially whispers your name in the dark. You'd think this advice would be obvious, but apparently paranoia decreases along with the amount of sleep you get. So remember, folks, if your dead bunker mate suddenly reanimates and invites you out for a midnight snack, politely decline and run like hell. Oh, and speaking of paranoia, I've got a special treat for you tonight. Allow me to introduce you to a new segment, Letters from the Lost. As always, these aren't really letters, just intercepted desperate transmissions I've managed to snag from what little airwaves remain uncluttered by mutants screaming. Tonight's transmission comes from a charming bunker far up north, where the temperature is freezing and apparently so are the souls of those who survived.
They're inside the ventilation shafts. We've sealed everything, but it's no use. They whisper through the vents, begging us to open up, pretending to be loved ones. Family we've lost. Don't trust the voices. Don't.
Well, wasn't that just heartwarming? Moral of the story. Never underestimate how manipulative a mutant insomniac can be, especially one that whispers through air ducts. Trust me, loneliness is preferable to dinner invitations from your dearly departed Aunt Ethel, especially since Aunt Ethel died 6 months ago, and these days she probably has extra eyes, teeth, and tentacles. Let's shift gears briefly to something slightly less horrific, air filtration. Because nothing screams good times like worrying about microscopic nightmares seeping through your vents, causing sleeplessness, violent tendencies, and a sudden craving for raw human flesh. It turns out that when your filtration system starts emitting suspicious odors or mysterious fluids, duct tape is your friend. Is it reliable? Number, is it comforting? Absolutely not. But it gives you something productive to do before you inevitably succumb. And speaking of things you can't trust, let's talk about hallucinations. Those lovely visual and auditory gifts, courtesy of prolonged insomnia. Just last night, I spent a solid hour convinced there was a mutant clown juggling radioactive squirrels in the corner. You know things are grim when radioactive squirrels are the most entertaining part of your day. But jokes aside, hallucinations can and will drive you insane. And here's where my public service announcement gets genuinely serious. Hold on to reality however you can. Write notes to yourself. Talk to your bunker walls. Build a nice little sock puppet companion, whatever it takes. Because trust me, if you let go of reality entirely, the monsters outside will start looking friendly. And then you're really screwed. So, enough sincerity. Let's move swiftly on. Our final feature for tonight is a brand new segment I like to call Jack's Kitchen Nightmares. Today's recipe, Mutant Rat Surprise. First, catch yourself a mutant rat. Careful not to lose a finger. Next, roast it over your makeshift stove until it reaches a nice, slightly less radioactive glow. Pair with sadness lettuce from your hydroponic garden, garnish with crushed hopes, and voila. Fine dining apocalypse style. Well, it sounds like my uninvited guests are getting impatient. I suppose that's my cue to wrap things up tonight. I promise, if I make it through another night without being dragged screaming into the darkness, I'll return tomorrow. Same time, same frequency, same hopeless humor. And remember, listeners, when insomnia is your reality, nightmares don't end when you wake up. They only get louder. Well, hello again, listeners. Assuming you're actually real and not just another one of my delightful hallucinations. Welcome back to Insomnia Underground, the last bastion of sanity, broadcasting live from humanity's subterranean nightmare, the hole. I'm your increasingly unstable host, Jack, ready to entertain, terrify, or at the very least confuse the hell out of you. Tonight's special episode is brought to you by the gentle whispers of madness, courtesy of insomnia-induced auditory hallucinations. You know, at first, I thought having no one to talk to down here was bad. Turns out, it's far worse when something starts talking back. Yes, listeners, tonight's hot topic, the soothing voices echoing through the ventilation shafts. If you've ever wondered what complete isolation and sleep deprivation will do to your sanity, I'm your living cautionary tale. It started just after midnight. Soft murmurs, faint whispers, barely audible beneath the hum of the filtration system. I tried ignoring them, I really did. But they're incredibly persistent. Kind of like door-to-door salesmen, except they're selling nightmares instead of encyclopedias. Now, you might be thinking, Jack, it's just hallucinations, nothing to worry about? Well, let me assure you, down here, hallucinations are never just hallucinations, especially when they start knowing your name. Take last night, for example. I'm innocently trying to pretend I might sleep again someday when I distinctly hear a voice, a familiar one no less, calling out to me. It was calm, almost comforting, whispering my name over and over. It sounded remarkably like my dearly departed Uncle Pete, which frankly is impressive, considering Uncle Pete's been dead for 20 years. And I thought, Jack, maybe Uncle Pete just stopped by to remind you about that money he owes you from 2005. But, of course, the rational part of my brain, that increasingly small endangered species, quickly pointed out the obvious. Mutants love impersonating dead relatives. Call it their version of nostalgic entertainment. So, survival tip number 4 from your resident bunker philosopher. Don't engage in casual conversations with vent-based whispers, even if they claim to be family, loved ones, or your imaginary childhood friend Carl. Because Carl's a liar, listeners. Carl always was. But let's move on to tonight's intercepted transmission. It comes to us courtesy of a bunker somewhere eastward, whose unfortunate inhabitants also apparently discovered vent whispers are a universally horrific phenomenon.
They're whispering constantly. They know everything about us. Names, secrets, memories. God, even things we never told anyone. They keep begging us to open the doors, promising it'll be painless. Please, someone tell me what they are.
Well, wasn't that a cheerful interlude? Truly heartwarming to know we're all equally doomed. And remember, if a mysterious voice promises a painless death, it's probably lying. Painlessness went out of style, right around the apocalypse. You know, on nights like these, I sometimes wonder if maybe, just maybe, I've already lost it. Maybe I'm broadcasting to an audience of mutants, radioactive squirrels, and figments of my deteriorating imagination. But if I'm honest, at this point, does it really matter? Before we wrap up tonight, let me share one final, deeply unsettling thought. What if these whispers aren't hallucinations at all? What if something really is lurking just behind those vents? Something smart enough, patient enough, and cruel enough to slowly erode what little sanity we have left? Now there's a comforting bedtime thought for you. Sweet dreams, listeners, Or at least as sweet as dreams can be when you've stopped sleeping entirely. And remember, when the voices whisper, don't whisper back. Welcome back, dear listeners, to another thrilling episode of Jack Slowly Loses His Mind. Broadcasting from Bunker 17, affectionately known as The Hole. Now featuring extra ventilation whispers, twice the paranoia, and absolutely zero hope. If you tuned in yesterday, you might remember we had an exciting new development in my ongoing psychological collapse. Friendly hallucinations of family members crawling through my air vents. Well, tonight's feature presentation makes those whispers seem positively delightful. You see, sleep deprivation is apparently the gift that keeps on giving. And folks, it's been especially generous lately. Let's dive straight in, shall we? Last night, around what I assume was 3 in the morning, time being rather abstract these days, I was treated to a private performance by the Carnival of Nightmares. Imagine a circus, but instead of clowns and cotton candy, you get grotesque mutants juggling severed limbs and performing acrobatics with horrifying flexibility. Trust me, once you've seen a mutant ringmaster twist itself into a human pretzel, you never really unsee it. And the best part? I knew none of it was real. But here's the tricky thing about hallucinations, listeners. Knowing they're fake doesn't make them any less terrifying, especially when your imaginary friends start applauding the performance, smiling with way too many teeth and eyes, placed in very uncomfortable places. Now you might wonder, Jack, how do you stay sane with all this going on? Short answer, I don't. Longer answer, duct tape, denial, and occasionally shouting at imaginary mutants to keep it down. Spoiler alert, it doesn't help. Which brings us neatly to tonight's survival tip number 5. When hallucinations start hosting talent shows in your bunker, it's probably time to seek help. Or, failing that, at least move to a different corner of your bunker and pretend it's someone else's problem. And speaking of distress, let's move on to tonight's intercepted transmission. This one comes courtesy of our friends down south, where apparently the nightmares have started holding their own performances.
We can't stop them. The hallucinations won't stop coming. They're everywhere. They're putting on these twisted shows, laughing at us, watching us. They're real. I swear they're real.
Well, wasn't that just inspiring? See, listeners, even apocalypse survivors deserve some entertainment. Granted, ours involves mutants and creeping insanity, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. But jokes aside, sometimes I genuinely wonder if this broadcast is my last tether to reality. Is anyone actually listening? Or am I just shouting into the void, narrating my spiral into madness for nobody but the monsters outside? Either way, I suppose it doesn't matter. Tomorrow night, I'll probably return, sanity permitting, with another riveting episode of Jack's Gradual Breakdown. Until then, dear listeners, remember, if your hallucinations invite you to a midnight carnival, RSVP no. Trust me, mutant clowns are terrible company. Well, greetings once again, fellow sufferers, assuming anyone else is even bothering to cling on to consciousness anymore. It's your reluctant host, Jack, broadcasting live from humanity's cozy apocalypse getaway, The Hole, where sleep is but a distant memory, and sanity is overrated anyway. If you're keeping track at home, we've reached the delightful point in our saga where hallucinations, paranoia, and creeping madness have officially become my full-time roommates. And folks, let me tell you, they do not clean up after themselves. Let's cut right to the chase tonight. Remember those whispers I mentioned? The ones in the vents, friendly voices of the dearly departed inviting me to open up and say hi? Well, they're getting louder, and frankly, way too personal. You know things are grim when imaginary voices start offering unsolicited advice about your life choices. You hear that? Maybe you don't. Maybe I'm just losing it. But they're here, always here, reminding me of every mistake, every regret, every embarrassing moment from childhood. It's like insomnia combined with therapy sessions from hell. But let's move swiftly on to tonight's exciting segment. Jack's survival tips that definitely won't save you. Episode 6. Tonight's tip is simple. When the voices from beyond start getting chatty, distract yourself with literally anything else. Count bunker ceiling tiles, catalog your dwindling supplies, or just scream loudly into your pillow, assuming you still have one. It's not helpful, but it's something. On that note, I've taken to cataloging my supplies. Turns out, I'm running dangerously low on essentials like food, water, and sanity. But good news, I have enough powdered eggs to last a lifetime. Because apparently, whoever stocked this bunker thought powdered eggs were humanity's best defense against the apocalypse. But enough about me. Let's dive into tonight's intercepted broadcast. A real crowd pleaser from a bunker somewhere east, where apparently the voices have become a bit too convincing.
They're in our heads, whispering, telling us to open the door, promising safety, food, rest, can't sleep, can't think. I saw someone open the hatch yesterday. God, they're inside now.
Well, wasn't that heartwarming? Remember, listeners, if the voices promise comfort and rest, they're lying. Comfort stopped existing the moment insomnia became humanity's default setting. You know, on nights like these, I wonder if there really are worse things than mutants waiting out there. Maybe the real nightmare isn't the monsters, but what's left of us. The parts of our minds that sleep used to keep locked away. Before I completely lose my mind, or what's left of it, let's wrap things up for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow, assuming I haven't finally decided to join the voices on the other side. Until then, listeners, just remember, insanity might be terrifying, but at least you're never truly alone. Good evening, listeners, or whatever passes for evening down here. This is Jack, your humble host, broadcasting live from humanity's cozy underground grave, The Hole. If you're still tuned in, congratulations, you've officially won the world's worst lottery. Tonight's episode is sponsored by existential dread and air filtration systems, both of which are currently failing spectacularly down here. You know, when civilization collapsed, I naively assumed radiation and mutants would be my biggest concerns. But it turns out slow suffocation ranks pretty high on the nightmare scale too. Who knew? Let me set the scene for you, dear listeners. Around 3 hours ago, during one of my lovely hallucination sessions, this time featuring a shadow puppet show performed by imaginary mutants, the ventilation system decided to join in on the fun. At first it was subtle, a faint rattling sound I easily dismissed as another charming figment of my imagination. But reality, as it often does lately, had other plans. By the time I realized the noise wasn't just another auditory hallucination, it had escalated from minor inconvenience to full-blown crisis. Now, I won't bore you with technical details, mostly because I don't understand them. But let's just say the filtration system decided oxygen was optional. So, like any responsible apocalypse survivor, I grabbed my trusty toolbox, mostly filled with duct tape, half-empty bottles of something vaguely flammable, and a wrench I barely know how to use, and bravely marched down the corridor. And let me tell you, listeners, bravery in an underground bunker basically translates to panicking quietly while pretending you're in control. Reaching the filtration room was the easy part. Opening the door was a different story. Imagine, if you will, the delightful sensation of knowing exactly how thin the metal door is between you and a potential mutant infestation. I briefly debated not opening it at all, but sadly, oxygen deprivation is even scarier than imaginary mutants. Marginally. Inside the room, things went from bad to worse at alarming speed. The filtration system, our final line of defense against the bacterial gas and airborne nightmares that started this whole apocalypse, was leaking. Yes, leaking. A gentle, innocent-looking mist of probable doom was seeping from a corroded pipe. It looked suspiciously harmless, but I've learned to distrust anything even vaguely benign down here. And here's where survival tip number 7 comes in handy, dear listeners. If your bunker's filtration system starts leaking unidentified mist, resist the urge to breathe deeply and investigate. Instead, consider panic as a viable alternative. Trust me, panic is underrated. It's surprisingly motivating. After a brief moment of existential dread, followed immediately by another longer moment, I hastily wrapped the corroded pipe in duct tape, prayed silently to whatever deity handles filtration emergencies, and exited promptly. I'm proud to report the mist stopped, at least for now, though I'm fairly certain duct tape isn't a permanent solution. But frankly, permanent solutions are something humanity abandoned when sleep became optional. But enough about my impending doom. Let's move on to tonight's intercepted transmission, this time from an unfortunate bunker northward, facing an eerily similar problem.
The mist is inside now. It's everywhere. We can't stop coughing. My vision is fading. Everyone is losing their minds. The walls are melting. No, that's not real. Please, someone help us.
Well, wasn't that just a delightful reminder that duct tape might be humanity's last pathetic line of defense against madness and suffocation? Truly comforting. You know, listeners, sometimes I wonder why I keep broadcasting. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe it's denial. Or maybe it's just comforting to pretend someone's out there, listening, holding on to sanity better than I am. Either way, I'll be back tomorrow, assuming the duct tape holds and I don't succumb to whatever nightmares slipped through tonight. Until then, dear listeners, remember, when your bunker starts leaking, panic might just save your life, or at the very least, entertain whatever mutant horrors are watching from the shadows.